So let's say it's 130 to 150 billion dollars for the sake of argument. Where does it come from?
Well, it's going to come from the same place all federal government spending comes from. That's why I said it's important that this program is funded by the federal government. If we're talking about state and local governments, they are revenue constrained. We know that. That's why they're cutting back and laying off their workers, because they really do have to pay for their spending out of their tax revenue, plus borrowing, although they're very constrained in borrowing, because as soon as they run a deficit, Moody's downgrades their debt, their interest rate goes up, and they can get into a vicious debt cycle. The federal government is completely different. The federal government actually, when Bernanke was asked, where does he get all this money that the Fed is using to buy toxic waste from banks in the bailout? And Bernanke said, you know, what we do is we have somebody that uses keystrokes. We push buttons on the computer and the deposits of the banks are increased.
And it was several $trillion.
Well, the total accounting of the bailout for Wall Street might be $20 trillion. A lot of that is guarantees that will only kick in when the next crisis hits. If banks don't recover, the bill will get bigger and bigger. But the guarantees, plus the purchases, plus the lending is $20 trillion. Okay? Compare that to the stimulus package, which was $1 trillion over 2 years. So that gives you the order of magnitude.
I mean, when I originally heard about this plan, I thought it was a lot more money, and I could never get my head around how do you just create that much money. Well, they've actually, I take your point, they've actually created a lot more than that money in terms of the way that they've been bailing out banks. So it's actually not really that much money. Yeah. So what's the resistance you get to this? Okay,
well, so one is that people don't understand how the federal government spends, so they worry about affordability. Now, I know you could say on even conventional terms this doesn't sound like a whole lot of money, but still they're going to say, but hold, the federal government's already broke. How are they going to pay for this? Okay, we've already got a $1 trillion budget deficit, so you're going to be adding to the budget deficit. So you need to explain that Bernanke was right, that this is not a question of the government doesn't have the money. The government creates the money as it spends. If you're a Social Security recipient on the first of the month, what happens is that you get a credit to your bank account. Where did the money come from? A keystroke. Okay? As Bernanke said, it's exactly the same way that the Fed buys toxic waste from banks. It's a keystroke. Okay, this is the same way that the Treasury credits the Social Security recipient.
So what are the limits of this kind of strategy? You know, as I say, $300 billion in this economy is not a lot of money. But what are the limits of how much you can do this? I mean, you know, if you want to extend it into the ridiculous, you know, you could just give everybody $20,000 a year, and that would be a great stimulus. Like, where is there a limit to how much you can just create money and distribute it?
Well, there is no limit to the government's ability to credit bank accounts. So if the government decided to credit everybody's account by $20,000, the government could do this. Okay, the only constraint is the government budgets programs, and you know, this is not likely to get through Congress. Let's credit everybody's bank account with $20,000. It's not likely to get through Congress. But if Congress decided that they wanted to do this, there wasn't a political constraint to it. There is no financial constraint to the government's ability to do that. Now, that probably would be inflationary.
Well, that's what I'm getting. That's my question, is when does this get inflationary? Not what do they have the technical ability to do it.
But of course, $20,000 into 300 million bank accounts is a lot more than what I'm talking about. Okay, first. The second is the incentive thing. Here, we're just saying, you're ready and willing to work, we will give you a job. Okay, that is less inflationary than saying, oh, you can quit your job and stay home because we're going to credit your bank account anyway.
Right.